Welcome back to The Outright Effect, a podcast in which unique perspectives challenge us to be better versions of ourselves. I'm Tempsy.
And I'm Shelly.
And today we're talking about the difference between growing up in Hawaii and moving to Hawaii after growing up on the mainland or anywhere else, really. And this is just a really interesting topic for me because moving to Hawaii was definitely a significant experience in my life, a good one. But I did see a lot of differences from where I grew up. And I just thought it would be an interesting topic as we kind of have these unique conversations or dynamic conversations together. We have these little snippets where we see a differentiation between what Shelly has gone through growing up here in Hawaii and what I've experienced growing up somewhere else and then moving to Hawaii. So we thought it'd be an interesting topic to discuss.
Sure. So I would say like one major difference that I'm not sure a lot of people may or may not know out there, but Hawaii has a very prevalent Asian population.
Sure.
And it, I think, is very different from other maybe communities across the U.S. that are Asian, because here, like the Asian residents here have been here for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm thinking back to when my grandparents were here, I mean, my grandparents were born and raised here. So I'd say, Asian people have been in Hawaii for probably over 100 years now.
Yeah.
They didn't just move here, recently or anything like that. And so, and I guess the reason why I'm pointing that out is because I have had friends who are Asian who moved here from, West Coast, East Coast, that kind of thing. And they're always surprised at, Asian people here, maybe someone like my grandma's age or something like that, who speak with no Asian accent. But, I think that's really what a huge difference is, because actually it's my great grandparents who had come here and were learning English. Maybe I don't even know if they spoke English, to be honest with you. But by the time, my grandparents were going to school, they had to speak English at school. They're with a whole bunch of other kids too. So I think that kind of lends itself to having like a different environment overall. Something that didn't really register to me until I heard it called out. I watched a YouTube video called Wong Fu Productions, and they're basically like an independent small film kind of company that posts, their work online. And their group is made up of a lot of Asian Americans, and kind of what I just described, there's someone on their team who is like third generation Asian American and some other people who are like second generation where their parents speak the native language of the country that they came from. And so it's interesting because they make a lot of references to each other as far as like what they're experiencing. And the person whose family has been in the US longer is like, I'm not really connecting with what you're saying or these things that you're saying your mom told you or your dad told you or anything like that, which I would kind of say that that's my example of, my life growing up. I don't have these like very direct like cultural connections. My parents weren't like holding me to certain standards that I feel are quote unquote like stereotypical Asian standards. So I don't really relate to those things. Those things are kind of like foreign to me. So that's kind of something that I kind of wanted to sort of, set the tone for and kind of give you guys a heads up that there is a little bit of a difference here in Hawaii because, people have just been around here for a long time.
Yeah, and, I'm from California, and they consider California a melting pot. But in reality, Hawaii is on a completely different level. There's no majority here. I was looking at a census from 2018. The Asian population is 37.8%, whereas the Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander alone, the percentage is 10.2%. Very close to the Asian alone, 2 or more races. So there has been some,
of mixing.
Yeah, absolutely. And contrary to what your experience was, my husband is second generation, and he was held to those standards. So you're absolutely right. It's completely different for every family, but I do feel like the Asian population in Hawaii is very different than the Asian populations in the mainland for the most part. Like in California, there are certain areas, like you have Koreatown, but it's huge. And there, a lot of Korean people live in that area, and they, tend to speak their language wherever they are. But here in Hawaii, we have a Chinatown, but people don't just speak Chinese there.
Right. It's just where you can find a lot of like Chinatown type things, like foods and whatnot. Products. I mean, one could argue Japantown is the city of Honolulu.
Yeah. Funny thing on this census, it says 0.04% is American Indian or Alaska Native. Shout out to my American Indians. I'm part of that 0.4%, but I'm only like 1/16. So it doesn't matter, but still gotta represent anyway.
Yeah, so definitely kind of what Tempsy said along the lines of a lot of like blending. There definitely is a lot of blending of cultural traditions, foods, and even words and phrases that people in, local Hawaii, like they use on a regular basis, and it's kind of built into the history. So way, way, way back in the day, probably when like my great grandparents came here, they, I'm guessing, only spoke Japanese. But around the same time, a bunch of other immigrants were coming from all over the place as well, like from countries or, from the US that also had their own languages that they spoke. And so when all these people come together and they all only speak their own language, how were they supposed to communicate with each other? So definitely like during that time, obviously they had to figure it out somehow. A lot of them were working together, like in plantations and that kind of stuff. That's kind of where like the Pidgin language, which is a dialect of Hawaii, essentially, I mean, there's certain words and phrases and references that people use that are very specific to this. That's kind of where that whole thing like came about, because people had to like borrow words from each other and kind of try to figure it out. There's probably some like hand motions and things like, like nonverbals going on to describe like this, orange, like that kind of thing. So
like shaka. No, I'm just kidding.
I have no idea where that comes from, to be honest with you.
But that's so funny you say that, because the first time that I saw my husband get super comfortable around his friends and start speaking Pidgin, I was kind of shocked, because we met in Vegas. He didn't seem to have that close of a connection to his heritage until I started really like spending more time with him. And then his friends came out and we were at the hotel hanging out with his friends. And all of a sudden, he gets super local and starts speaking Pidgin. And I was like, I don't even know what that word is. What did he just say? So it was just so amazing to me. So does that mean that he knows 4 languages then?
Pidgin is different depending on where you are as well. So if you're on a different island, that's also different, because my mom's family is from Kauai. And that's I have a hard time understanding my relatives sometimes.
I heard about that.
Like it's very strong.
Or they use different words.
Or they use different words, and I'm like, what is this in reference to?
Their languages melted together a little bit differently, or something like that.
Or like the references are a little bit different. Also, so I mean, I've been around Pidgin like basically my whole life. I mean, that's basically how my grandpa talked, and my parents pretty much talk like that too, especially like at home. But I don't.
I know you definitely
clearly
don't.
And if I do, people look at me like, what are you trying to do here? But but I do know like there's like variations of it, and I feel like there is like differences in it, even like on Oahu, like on one island, just depending on like where you are geographically, like it can vary from place to place.
What's funny is there are certain words, that you never know where they come from. You don't really know if they're Pidgin. I mean, I'm talking from an outsider's perspective. Like, you don't know if they're Pidgin. You don't know if they're a certain language. Like, for instance, Niele. Is that Hawaiian? Is that Pidgin? Is that another language that everybody else just adopted? But, like, also Shishi. That's Japanese, right?
It actually isn't Japanese.
Oh, it's not?
No, it's a shortened version of a Japanese word, but that's not actually Japanese.
I thought it was Japanese. Oh,
so even that, there is some,
yeah. So it must be considered
having
Pidgin,
shortcuts, then. Or like they're changing it up a little bit different.
What about bocha?
So I think it's the same thing, where it's like it comes from a Japanese word, but is not like some of the words that we use here that we think are Japanese. If you were to go to Japan and use them, people would be like, I don't know what you're saying.
Oh,
like Japanese people would not know what is going on. Even like kakimochi.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a Japanese word.
Oh.
Neither is, I think there's a certain type of mochi that's not traditional, and here we call it chichidango. That's not a Japanese word either.
I thought that was Korean. Is it not?
No.
Okay.
Well, I don't know what it is. I don't think it's Korean, but I know. So the person who cuts my hair, she's Japanese from Japan, like grew up there, but her English is totally fine. She's been in the US for a long time, and she had given me that example. Like if you said chichidango in Japan, people would be like, I don't know what you're talking about, but really you're talking about mochi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, like Niele means that you're nosy, right? And shishi means you have to go pee.
Yeah.
So we say that with my son because you don't want to be walking around town saying you had a pee pee. So
It's a little like lighter way to say
yeah,
it. Like,
so everybody here
Like
says,
cuter, yeah.
everybody here says shishi, and it's accepted as more PC.
Yeah.
Kind of,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So I like it. But then, when I started working here, I started saying things satirically because I'm new, So I would joke around and be like, sometimes I would say, oh, small kind. And I would be joking. But people were like, no, you live here now. It's like,
yeah.
either
that's
you
what you meant.
either you
Yeah.
commit or no, you don't commit. So now I can't even be satirical about it. So it changes over time, right? But I do think that the pidgin is very interesting. Like Kanak attack, I didn't learn till very recently.
Food coma, basically.
Yeah, food coma. Akamai, I learned maybe
smart.
a year and a half ago. So you just keep learning new stuff all the time. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like that kind of adds to, sort of like what you're mentioning on being multilingual. Although these are not like necessarily languages or anything like that per se, but I think it does add another element to like learning and like understanding other things or phrases and words. Yeah,
absolutely. Honestly, moving here from the mainland, it was a little bit of a culture shock for me for some of the things that you've already talked about. But not just me, but we worked at a sister restaurant to Cheesecake Factory in Vegas. And there were a lot of people who tried to transfer to the Cheesecake Factory in Waikiki. And there's a specific transfer rule or policy that you don't get to keep your seniority when you go there. So if anybody knows the Cheesecake Factory in Waikiki, it's extremely busy. And if you're moving to Hawaii or Honolulu from somewhere in the mainland, it's likely that you're probably, unless you know the islands really well, you're probably going to move to Waikiki because it's kind of what you know. It's kind of the main area, right? The standard of living in Waikiki is probably the highest. Would you say?
I would say right now, it's kaka'ako.
Oh, well now, but at the, when we were
Those buildings
there,
weren't up yet.
You're
though.
right, you're right. Now it's kaka'ako, but at the time, I'm pretty sure it was Waikiki. And so you have a high standard of living, you have a busy restaurant where you have no seniority, so they're basically giving you two tops at a time. You're not making any money, which, in Vegas, you were making a lot of money because you had seniority, you got the best, sections and tables. And then you come here and you don't know the culture. People are really friendly here, but it's just different. And so I think those folks got culture shock when they came here, and they ended up, like, more often than not, moving back. And it was interesting. I had culture shock, but it wasn't to the point where I couldn't handle it. It was a positive culture shock because I got to enjoy different cultures around me. I got to enjoy the food. Like, some of the foods that are here, it's kind of a specialty in the mainland. Like you would,
loco moco.
Well, lokomoko or yakiniku or shabu shabu.
Yeah. Asian foods.
Yeah.
That we just I could just walk across the street and go buy whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
The yakiniku place by my mom's house in my hometown, we would only go there for her birthday because she loved it. Like it was a special thing. It's a little bit more expensive because it was like a show, that kind of thing. It's like interactive, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So, it's just interesting that some people can handle it. I've also heard of island fever. Have you heard of that?
Yep.
And that's for people who move here from anywhere else, except maybe an island, where
those who are not used to living on islands.
Yeah, where if you can drive around within 3 hours, some people feel like they're stuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I didn't get that, thank goodness. But also some things that you might see when you're on an island, or this island anyway, the rainbow state, is rainbows. And I was just talking to a friend the other day, and she mentioned, and I agree, that when she pointed out a rainbow to people who've grown up here, they were like, yeah, whatever. Didn't seem like a big deal, where she was like super stoked to see it. There's often double rainbows here. And I experienced the same thing. I'm super stoked when I see a rainbow because we never see them, not never, but we rarely see them. It's very special when you see a rainbow. People in Hawaii, they're used to it. So
we see them a lot.
Whatever.
We're like, it rains, there's a rainbow.
It's like a desensitization of, rainbows. It's sad. Have you experienced that at all?
Yeah, I would say I'm desensitized to rainbows. I don't get excited about them or anything. I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, it's happening. It's raining. it's going to last for about 5 minutes because the rain only lasts here for a short period of time.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
Rain. And it's hot when it rains most of the time. Rarely in Vegas we would get a hot rain. Rarely. California, always cold rain. Always. I never knew anything else but cold rain until I went to Vegas. And then I moved here and it was always hot rain. I was like, what's going on?
I know people who prefer it. So I do have relatives who live in Washington State. And when they get caught out in the rain, they're like, oh my God, it's so freezing. So once they were here visiting and it rained and they're like, I'm not cold. They're like so thankful. You know, they're like, I'm not all soaked and like freezing in the rain. It's just like, oh,
Don't get me wrong. I love hot rain. It's just surprising. You know, like it's a shock.
Yep. Tropical climate.
Is there anything that you feel like, anything else that you feel like you're desensitized to?
Yeah, I guess I would say I am probably desensitized to people referencing Aloha Spirit. I know that probably sounds really bad coming from someone who's lived here forever, but I was just watching this video on YouTube where these two guys who are not from Hawaii came here and they do a little like food tour while they're here and stuff like that. And one of them mentioned like you can really feel the Aloha Spirit, like it's just everywhere. And I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, okay. I mean, are people really that bad everywhere else? Like, why are why is it so noticeable, I guess? Because for me, I'm just like, I mean, I know what it means, like, you know, kind of like being kind, like, you know, treating with people with respect and that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like that's just normal for me.
Like, but that's a good thing.
It's an expected thing.
Yeah, but that's just how you live.
Right, yeah.
So it's not a negative thing that you're desensitized to it. It's just, that's how everybody
like,
is
I would
here.
hold the door open for somebody. Obviously, I wouldn't just let it slam on them.
Yeah.
But, you know.
I hope not. To give a little context on the culture shock that I experienced when I came here, it was a bit humbling because living in the mainland, I pretty much lived with some conveniences that I took for granted, essentially. You know, the fact that when I moved here, AC is a privilege, not a right. You know what I mean? Like, if you're looking for somewhere to live, there are certain things that you would anticipate would already be included for the places that I've lived anyway. I've lived in Vegas. I've lived in California. I didn't live in the metropolitan areas in either of those places, so maybe that's part of the difference is that when I moved to Hawaii, it was smack dab in Honolulu and right in the metropolitan area. So I don't know what that comparison is, but in this case, it was kind of a privilege to have AC, washer and dryer in unit, parking. So like guest parking or even included parking without having to pay extra for it. In addition to that, you know, if you purchase a place, you're paying a maintenance fee on top of your mortgage, right? Mm-hmm. So these were differences that I just took for granted in the mainland. And so it was a good humbling experience to be like, hey girl, you know, realize that those things don't always come to you automatically.
Yeah.
You know? Mm-hmm. So it was very interesting. My husband was born and raised here. So my first trip was when he proposed. I got to see both like the local life and the tourist perspective. So that was interesting. I saw a couple of people my husband knew almost every time we went out. So we would go somewhere, the beach, we would go to a place to eat, and he knew 2 to 3 people here. And it's such a small island, you know, it's big, but it's so small that you know everybody. Mm-hmm. So now that I've been living here for a while, I've learned my lesson to not leave the house unless I'm at least, you know, at the very minimal, just presentable because you're going to run, just bank on the fact that you're going to run into somebody.
Yeah. And I think maybe part of that too goes into the Aloha Spirit thing because it is kind of small town feeling. You don't want to ruffle feathers or burn bridges because it's not like you're only going to see that person one time ever. You probably will run into them at some point again too.
Exactly. But all of my husband's friends and family were so welcoming. This is part of the Aloha Spirits, you know, conversation is that when I first came here, that first trip, everybody checked in on me. They wanted my phone number so they could call me. One person a couple people actually took me out and showed me the touristy side of things. And it was just really nice. But my experience was more of the local experience, which was really nice. But I was like, can I get a little of the touristy stuff for just like...
That's what people come here for.
Yeah, just like a day. Yeah. You know what I mean? But it's just so nice that people take care of you. When I first actually moved here, my first month I lived with Daniel's Daniel's parents. My husband's name is Daniel. I don't think I've established that yet. I'm talking to Shelly. She already knows. But I lived with his parents for the first month, and he came a month later. So, and his sister was living there at the time too. So it was 4 of us living in a 504 square foot apartment. And that's kind of pretty typical here. You know, it was different for me, but I was so welcomed, and it was like automatic. You know what I mean? It wasn't, they would never have said no. It was like, no, you're going to stay here until Daniel moves out
There's
here.
no question about it.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing that was so interesting was when my sister-in-law, you know, I hadn't spent a whole lot of time with her just yet, but we did get to know each other a little bit. And she went on a trip while I was living there, and she said, hey, just borrow my car, go ahead and take it wherever you need. So originally I was taking the bus everywhere because the reason I came before Daniel is because I started a job here. And I would bus to work because I didn't have any form of transportation. Before that, I hadn't taken a bus since elementary school. So it was different, but it was easy. You know, it was an easy thing to do. The transportation here is really good. But she, you know, she's so welcoming, and she took me under her wing, and she let me use her car when she was gone. It was just such a nice feeling of, it's just different, you know. Of course, my family is welcoming and takes care of people, but when you come here and you know, you're just welcomed with so much care, and people want to take care of you. It's just so nice. And that was part of my culture shock. It's like different, you know?
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of people visiting us in Simi Valley, California. You know, it's not a tourist spot. It's not somewhere where, you know, family from across the globe is coming to visit. This is the place where people come to visit, even family to visit locals, right?
Sure.
So
yeah,
it's just a different mentality. Another thing that was surprising was how beautiful the beaches were. I mean, I've heard about how beautiful beaches are in Hawaii, but it's nothing compared to when you see them. They're gorgeous. The blues are beautiful. The beaches in California aren't that amazing. There's a lot of seaweed. It kind of looks brownish, greenish, and it's cold. It's like cold 90% of the time. Don't get me
Like a
wrong.
pool.
I love California. I was born and raised there. I love California, but I never went to the beach. It was always, even though it's hot outside, the ocean was still freezing cold.
that's so interesting to me. I wonder why that is. Anyways, I mean, I don't know who I would ask to find this out, but
Not me. But, you know, the beaches here are just amazing, and I am so grateful. And one thing that I would tell people is that if you've moved here from somewhere else, or even if you've lived here your whole life, and even if you're not into beaches, just make sure you're taking advantage of the paradise that you live in. Go outside, go on a hike. You know, if you need hike suggestions, email us at theoutrighteffect@gmail.com. We'll give you, you know,
some easy ones.
some easies. We'll tell you easy, medium, hard, or advanced. But it just take advantage of the island, you know. Even Shelly's not a beach person, but you go out and you hike and you take advantage of the island and the beauty that's here.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, you know, what I've heard from some folks too who are not from here is that what somebody really appreciates about Hawaii being what it is and having beaches and like these nature type things that you can do is that it's so close to everything else too. So it's not like you have to drive like 3 hours to get to a hike or anything like that. It's like a 20-minute drive. You go do a hike, or, you know, like the beach is not a huge, like, I don't know, like a road trip to the beach. You know, it's like right there, 10 minutes. Like,
That's a great point. Because in California, it was a 45-minute drive to go to the beach where I lived.
I honestly would never go. I mean, I currently don't go to the beach, but if it took me 45 minutes to do something like that, I'm not sure I would do it.
It was like an event. It was like you packed stuff, you know.
You make it a day.
Yes. Yeah. Whereas now we live maybe a 10-minute drive from the beach.
If all the lights are red.
Yeah, exactly. And we just go when the sun is kind of starting to go down so that it's not like blazing on us. And we just hang out for an hour, maybe 2, go home.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's just
easy.
It's like going to the grocery store.
And a ton of people, that's funny. And a ton of people do that, you know, like they go surfing after work or even before work, that kind of thing. It's like super convenient. So, I mean,
it's a totally different life.
Yeah.
And it's cool. I absolutely love it. You know, another thing that surprised me about living here is how different the cities are. So you have Honolulu, which is huge, but within Honolulu, you have these little towns, you know, Mo'iliili, Makiki, Punahou, all these different towns, and it's like separated by a block or 2.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Together.
It's super interesting. And once you get past what we consider a town and you go to, let's say, Hawaii Kai, for instance, which is still considered Honolulu.
And
right?
kind of considered town. I feel like people would consider it town.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You'd know better than me, but
if you were to go like outside like Moanalua, Pearl City, Aiea,
yeah.
that's outside of town.
I also wanted to mention Kapolei. So
Yeah, that's
Hawaii
far.
Kai to me, Hawaii Kai to me is more like home, like the community. It's more of a suburb, I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
So it's more spread out. There's more homes, like houses. There are some still apartments and things like that, but the mix of those things is much like Vegas and California to me. It's not exactly, but you have your grocery stores, you have your little food places. That reminds me of home. And it's wide open. You have left turn lanes. Town, you don't have a whole lot of left turn lanes. Makes it very difficult to make a left turn. And you have parking, open parking. You don't have to pay for it.
Park on the side of the road outside your friend's house or whatever. Yeah.
I can't tell you how many parties I've gone to in town where I circled the block 3 times and said, I'm going home. Because I'm like, I don't have a knack for it. I didn't grow up here. My husband, he can get a parking spot, no problem. He has this sixth sense about him because he's grown up here. And I feel like people who grew up in town, they can do it.
Yeah.
Or maybe people are just more tenacious
Patient?
than me.
They're ambitious. They're like, I need to find a parking stall.
Or I need to go to this party.
Right. Yeah,
You
that's
know?
true too.
Mine was like an Easter party with kids, and I was like, you know what? I could just go home right now. I don't need to go to this party. I was very new to Hawaii anyways, so I was just like, you know what? Next time, I'll figure this out over time. When I went to a veterans charity, it was a golf charity in Kapolei. That's probably the city that most felt like home because it's definitely a suburb. It's definitely not town, and it's not in Honolulu. This place is really far, but it has mostly single family homes. It's wide open. It just does remind me of home, but it's just too far to live.
Yeah, it's pretty far. And actually, Kapolei is starting to be considered like the second city of Oahu because they have the most like stuff out there. Like there's a mall, and I guess like maybe the amount of people who are living there. But I mean, I'm not often in that area because I live like on the other side of the island from it. But I can't say that I remember seeing an apartment building around there before. I don't think I know there's townhouses.
I think they have more.
There's townhouses and like single family homes, but I feel like I haven't, or maybe I haven't driven past an apartment building there. But I mean, it's not clear to me. Like there's no like skyrise like condos or anything over there.
And I think the weather out there is drier.
It is drier.
Like there's all these different cities. Like I think is it Kaneohe that's more moist? Like
it's windy.
Oh, it's windy.
Yes, and right over the other side in Nu'uanu, that's where it's all wet and rainy. And Manoa.
Manoa, Manoa's damp too. But Manoa's pretty close to us.
Yes, Manoa's very close.
Kaneohe's further.
Yeah.
But Manoa's close. It's in town. It's considered town. And it's definitely...
That's suburbs, Manoa.
Yeah, absolutely. And the weather is completely different.
Oh, yeah, it's like dry in like the next valley over and like one valley's wet. And like, that's basically how that works.
And then coming here this morning, where I live, it could be sunny, and then where Shelly lives, it could be like pouring cats and dogs.
Which is what happened.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it. But I feel like I know quite a few people who live in, let's say, like Hawaii Kai. Even though it's considered town, it's still 20 minutes away from the epicenter of town. And people don't often venture into town unless they're either going to work, they're going to a party or an event, or they're fulfilling some sort of obligation. You know what I mean? Almost like in Vegas, if anybody lives in Vegas that's listening, it's like you only go to the Strip if you work on the Strip.
That's Waikiki.
That's Waikiki
totally.
too.
Like you only go there if you're
Yep. Or if you have friends visiting.
Right.
Otherwise, you stay as far away as possible.
Right. So for me personally, although I have grown up like my whole life in the Honolulu area, I was never in like Metro Honolulu. And most people I knew, like friends, as a kid, also lived in the suburbs. But I'm still considered a townie because of the area that I grew up in. And it references how close I was to town or like the city, which is like relatively close. So I know we're talking about Kapolei, that's pretty far. Like you wouldn't that's like a 45-minute to an hour drive from town. But if you're kind of in the general like Honolulu area, people would call you like a townie. And honestly, I didn't have experience with going to like a friend's apartment or anything like that until much later, like maybe college, when I had friends who were going to college, renting apartments off campus or like living on their own. There were definitely times I would give up quickly, like Tempsy said, when I was trying to find someone's house because parking was difficult. And, you know, not all apartments or condos have a lot of guest parking. Sometimes, you know, just depending on which one it is, sometimes they're just like 2 stalls or something like that. So if there's nothing and you're like needing to circle the block numerous times for street parking, and most other people parking in the streets live in that area, so they're not moving anytime soon, then I would be like, nah. For the majority of the time, most of my friends did live kind of in suburb areas, so I was kind of like parking outside their parents' house or something like that. But I would say like one thing that people probably don't know about Hawaii is the traffic can be really bad, especially during rush hour. I know that in recent years, Hawaii traffic has been compared to LA traffic, which to me is like kind of sad because I'm like, I feel like it's very different, or it should be anyway. But and I believe the reason is up until recently, there weren't a lot of condos in the metro Honolulu area. So people would have to live in suburbs outside of the city and then have to like commute into work from wherever that is. Plus nowadays, a lot of young families who like really, really want that single family home, to find that affordable one, you have to go a little bit further. And I think that's probably how it is in a lot of other places too.
Yeah.
Like I've heard of people having like 4-hour drives like on the mainland, and that to me just blows my mind. Like
That's crazy.
if my drive's more than 30 minutes, I'm not going to work at that place. Honestly, like that's just too much time sitting in a car for me.
Yeah.
I could be doing a lot of other things with my time.
But yes, as you get further and further out from the metropolitan area of Honolulu, it does definitely get cheaper to live. You get more bang for your buck. So
Not
even
as
though
congested.
even though there are more condos that have gone up, you know, in recent days, people still like the cost of living is still high.
Yeah,
So-
the condos are expensive.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're like they have had some like affordable condos go up recently, but there's a lot of restrictions, so not a lot of people can get them. But I mean, I kind of understand. It's not the best scenario, but I understand it. For myself, I guess since I have lived in the suburbs, and really what I mean by suburbs, it's like right on the edge of Metro Honolulu is where I pretty much grew up. So I'm kind of used to like a short commute.
Yeah.
Because I've been doing it. I didn't go to school like right near where I live, so I would have to sort of like commute to school like high school. And college, I went to UH Manoa, University of Hawaii. So that was kind of like a little bit of a commute as well. I would deal with all of the rush hour traffic in the morning, like when everybody else is trying to go to work. So those were kind of like normal things, and it never like really bothered me a lot. Like it's not something, I wasn't having road rage in the car or anything like that. You know what I mean? But I do know people who live in like Aiea, Pearl City. They totally never go into town unless they have to. Yeah. And that would drive me up the wall, to be honest with you, because I'm not like a home person. I mean, I know like I'm okay with staying at home, and there's like sometimes, you know, like let's say on New Year's, I'd rather stay at home, maybe just depending on how I'm feeling than going out. But I also like to do a lot of things. Like I like to go to the mall. I like to like look around at stuff. I like to try new food and like check out little shops and whatever, hang out with my friends. So I do go out a lot. And so, I mean, in order for me to go out, I need to drive somewhere. I'm not going to teleport there. We're not that advanced yet. But, you know, and for me, it's just like listening to some good music, putting on well, back then it was like a CD. Now it's like streaming music from your phone. But, you know, I was totally fine with doing that, totally cool with it. And for me, I think here, probably also similar to sort of maybe like Southern California, LA culture, we're used to driving everywhere, like in our own car.
Yeah.
I personally would get totally lost on the bus. I know Tempsy has caught the bus here. She's probably caught the bus way more times than I have in my whole life, even though I lived here the entire time. But for some reason, when I travel and I go to big cities where public transportation is the way to go, like Tokyo, New York, and London, I'm okay with using public transportation. And I somehow don't end up in the totally wrong place, which is kind of amazing because I'm not used to the public transportation system.
That's opposite for me.
And one of these places, it's not even in the same language that I speak.
That's opposite for me. I can handle the bus here just fine, but when we went to New York, my husband had to take over because I'm like, what is going on here? Like, I don't understand.
It is
Why
confusing.
are we going the wrong way?
Yeah, I think if Hawaii, and I don't know if this will ever happen. I know we're getting a rail pretty soon, but if Hawaii, or if I lived in a place that had cool transportation, like public transportation, subway system, train thing, I would use it. But I don't have that where I am. I need to drive regardless or catch the bus, which then I'd end up in like, I don't know. I don't know where I would end up if I caught it. But yeah.
You know what's funny? Conversely, about, you know, some people who live away from town, only going to town when absolutely necessary. My husband doesn't like to go too far away from town. So all of the beautiful beaches that are on the west side, I've probably seen one or two, because he just does not want to drive that far. Anything more than 10 minutes away is too far. And when I was growing up in California, I lived in Simi but worked in Glendale, and that's about a 45-minute commute every single day, one way. Mm-hmm. I was used to it, so I'm trying to, you know, live my best life here and take it, you know, make sure I'm taking full advantage and not taking for granted living in paradise. And my husband's like, nah, I don't want to drive there. I'm like, you probably experienced this already. Like, let's have some fun and go. So I'm still working on that. But maybe one day we'll get to the point where we're able to drive a little bit more. And I think, you know, allowing our child to experience that side of Hawaii too is going to be important. So I'm sure we'll get there. But it's interesting, that mentality of a townie. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I guess kind of odd, like related to that, if I go somewhere else, like if I'm going on a trip to like another state or something, and if I have to be in a car for a long time, that like, it annoys me so much, just because I'm like, so I'm stuck in this car, and you kind of have to pay attention. You know what I mean? Like if you're on a plane, you can sleep, you can do whatever you want. The pilot is taking care of that for you. But if you have to actually be awake and aware so you don't crash your car and like end up in a bad situation, right?
Yeah.
But even like, I mean, not only in a new place, but if we're talking about a 30-minute drive here versus a 4-hour drive somewhere else, like, you know, you get tired driving after a certain period of time. Draining. I'd rather just go to the airport, but that's just me.
For a 4-hour drive. So I have a couple questions for you, Shelly.
All right.
I've heard a lot of locals joke. They say, yeah, I had to go to the mainland for college to learn how to read and write. Have you heard that before? And if so, like, what do you think that's about?
So I would say that I haven't heard that verbatim before. Like, I haven't heard like those direct references, but what I would imagine that, you know, those kinds of things come from, people are probably thinking I'm lying right now, but I literally have never heard somebody say it just like that.
It was funny when this first came up. I'm like, really? You never heard that?
But I would say that a long time ago, and we're talking like before either of us were alive probably, I'm thinking that Hawaii didn't have a really good university system, or there probably weren't a lot of degree program options, you know, as schools were new, like they're just starting up. So people probably had no choice but to move away. I mean, what other options would they have had, right? Like, let's say if you wanted to study something specific and the school that you had access to didn't have it, you're going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
But I also think kind of like what we were mentioning before with all the mixing of the languages and, you know, pidgin coming into play a lot. I think, you know, that was so heavily ingrained in the culture, it could possibly make it challenging for people to find work depending on what they want to do, like, you know, highly professional jobs. So let's kind of, well, I'm going to take a trip down memory lane anyway and go back about like 10 years ago. And I can't say that I can speak from personal experience like 100%, but I would say I've noticed that options have expanded from like 10 years ago, maybe when I was getting out of college, to like things that people can learn today in colleges that have been here and we're still, you know, are still around. So I think it's possible that a lot of people still have the mentality and automatically think they have to go away for school, because 10 years is a short period of time to like retrain habits and like, you know, lifestyle and what, you know, like my parents would never, I mean, I think their recommendations to me would be the same. Like those things wouldn't have changed within a 10-year span, right? And so, you know, at the end of the day, I think it depends. So let's say, for example, if you really wanted to study marine biology, where do you think would be a really good place to study it? Probably here.
Yeah.
You know, you have access to a lot of the natural resources to learn those things. And so I would think that if someone somewhere wanted to learn that, odds are they're probably going to the University of Hawaii. And I think there's actually something with HPU that's like along the coast. They have some kind of area where you can actually like go into the water and like look at all these things. So, you know, that's something that I would argue is the same, but, you know, the flip side, right? So if somebody, like, let's say if somebody's like, I want to learn something technology based, you probably wouldn't do that here. You probably go to wherever Google is or something. You know what I mean? Like these high tech companies.
And in addition to going to school in the mainland for something like that, you would also want to work in the industry for a certain
get that
period of time.
experience, right.
And then when you come back, you can get a really good job
Right.
back in your hometown.
Yep. And at the same time too, you know, something that I was also thinking is that, like, let's say for example, if you like, you're living wherever you're living, and you turn 18, you're like, I want to experience adult life away from my parents. You're going to move away.
Yeah.
And you can't really get that far if you're going to stay here. So what are you going to do? You're going to jump on a plane
Unless
and
you
you're going
live
to move
on
away.
another island.
Yeah, then right.
Yeah.
And I mean, Oahu's I think we probably have the most colleges than any other island. So if you lived on another island, you wanted to like get away from your family and experience like living independently as an adult, you probably come to Oahu. But if you're on Oahu, you're like, I guess I'm going to go to
Yeah.
wherever else, you know?
Yeah.
So for myself personally, I would say that I thought I was going to end up in California somewhere. And I think it's because of my personality and lifestyles and things that I enjoy kind of match up well with things in California, whether that be Northern or Southern California. So I did apply to schools on both, like both ends of California. But at the end of the day, I think that I stayed home because of the tuition expense. So back then when I was going to school at the University of Hawaii, it was like cheap, like
Yeah.
in comparison to a lot of other places that I had applied to. So UH a semester, I think the cheapest I ever saw it was under $2,000 a semester.
Wow.
Why wouldn't I
Take advantage of
right. When some colleges I applied to, and granted, some of them were kind of like expensive private colleges, they were like $30,000 a year.
Ooh.
And I was like, under $2,000 a semester, that's $4,000 a year, or 30 a year. That's like a huge difference, you know, and like call me practical. But I also didn't know what I wanted to study when I was 18. You know, I was kind of like,
Oh, yeah.
I didn't have a thing I was super connected to. Like,
Yeah.
I definitely know there are people out there who know exactly what they want to do straight out of high school, maybe even younger.
Yep.
I didn't know. And so I was like, am I going to waste like 20 plus grand a year to just figure it out? Like, you know, just
Yeah.
mess around, maybe like not really focus.
I'm
To me,
I'm living proof, Shelly. I went to culinary school and I don't know how to cook a turkey. You know, like I'm not in the restaurant industry. I might be in the future. Hopefully I'll have my own business in one day, but I'm living proof of that. You know, I spent a
Yeah.
good amount of money on my education and I'm not even doing it. So
yeah, so I think that can happen anywhere. But also I feel like there was a college that I had applied to on the northeastern side. Why I did that, I don't know. I mean, that's like freezing half the year. But
Yep.
a lot of schools, though, that are far away from here that don't have as much cultural diversity at their school, but kind of need it, they were like really trying to get me to go there because they didn't have any like Hawaii Asian kids.
Wow.
Like either or, I don't know which one, you know? So it was like scholarships and all that kind of stuff like being
Wow.
thrown at me. But I was like, I just don't want to be cold. Sorry. Can you stop sending me stuff?
Wow.
So, you know, I think that's another reason why people opt to leave because like, number one, like if you're that 18-year-old, like I just want to get away, live my own life, whatever. And then you find this school who doesn't, you know, they need you to like help their stats or whatever,
their
really, you
demographic,
know,
yeah.
and add some diversity to their campus. And if they're going to give you a good deal, why wouldn't you take it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of expensive schools,
Yeah, I
there
went to an
are-
expensive school.
there are a lot of private schools here. Growing up in California, well, my town anyways, I can't speak for like other metropolitan areas that might have more private schools. We had one private elementary school in my town, and it has since closed. Some were what they called fundamental schools. So they had some sort of ranking or like certification for schools, and if you met this certain standard, you could be considered a fundamental school. And you know, I don't really know the significance behind it, but all school is public and free. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When I came here and I heard so many people talking about schools and private schools, and you know, the question that comes right after you get introduced to somebody is, where'd you go to school? And the question is referring to high school, which is so interesting to me because if you ask somebody in the mainland, you know, anyway, where I come from, I don't know about the entire United States. I'm just saying like where I come from. If you ask them, where'd you go to school? They're going to automatically think of college. You know what I mean? So it was interesting to me when somebody asked, oh, where did you go to school? And they were expecting to hear what high school you went to. So what is
Yeah.
the significance of that? And how do people, I don't know if you know this, but how do people decide whether to send their kid to public school or private school other than the financial side of it? Like, that's
Yeah.
a pretty logical.
Right.
These private
expensive.
schools, I think Punahou's at $25,000 a year.
I think it might be more.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's
Times have
expensive.
changed. I mean, it's gotten really expensive since I was in high school, but it also has been longer than I'd like to admit that I've been in high school. But I mean, so while I can't say the real reason why people are asking what high school you went to or whatever, I do feel like it's part of like wanting to feel that connection between you and somebody else. Oh, you went to that school? I know somebody who went there. And I think it's sort of a really easy conversation starter for somebody here because, you know, like we were talking about earlier, kind of small community,
Yep.
even though, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people, over 1 million people in Hawaii, and we're on an island. It's not super huge, but I think it helps people feel like I can trust this person. They know my cousin or something, or my best friend or something like that. So then you kind of feel a little bit more comfortable with like getting to know them or trusting them and that kind of thing. And
That
having
makes
that, yeah, having that sort of like network.
It's all about the degrees of separation.
Right. Yeah. And the closer they are, the better you feel about, you know, who you're spending your time with or whatever. Like you feel more okay, confident that they're a good person and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But I think the significance has probably changed over time. To be candid, I think I will get a lot of people riled up when I say this, but I would argue that, you know, some parents' intent sending their kid to a certain school could be in regards to bragging rights.
True.
You know,
I have heard that.
I think that plays into the picture probably more than people might want to admit. I don't think that's the only reason, but I do feel like it comes up from time to time.
Well, to be specific, a little bit more specific, Obama went to Punahou.
Yeah.
Right? And it is very well known that if you go to Punahou, that you have a lot more opportunities to go to Ivy League schools in the mainland. Everybody on the mainland knows Punahou. Do you think that happened just when Obama got into office, or
No,
that was before
it
too,
was,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not just about
So
Obama.
there's a level of prestige that goes behind some of these private schools, like Punahou is one of them. For myself, I did also go to private school for most of my life, but I think there's some other influence into that as well. So my mom, I think, like I mentioned on this episode or a previous one, she grew up on Kauai. I honestly don't think Kauai has any private schools at all.
Oh.
And I think they have like one community, maybe one or two community colleges. So my mom coming from there to here, she's like, I'm trying to give my kid the absolute best to make her
Right.
successful in life. So girl's gonna go to private school. So I had no say in the matter, obviously. I mean, kindergarten, what kind of argument could I have made back then?
Right.
And I would say, unfortunately, there's a lot of stereotypes that I've encountered based on going to private school. So like back when I was in college, I had a part-time job and I had to go, you know, to different parts of the island, sometimes different islands for my work. And immediately when I start talking, people will look at me, say that I grew up in a certain place, went to a private school, or, oh, are you going to college on the mainland? Straight up, just based on like me showing up and being like, hi, how are you guys doing? And that's it. Like people can immediately tell.
So interesting.
Yeah. Which none of those things, I mean, I didn't go to college on the mainland, so all the other things I can't deny.
Right.
You know, I was kind of like, whoa, that's creepy. Are you following me around? You know where I live? And like, I went to private school, but
Right.
it's just, I think, partially a persona. And I do feel like a lot of people who do or have gone to private school, we weren't allowed to, I wouldn't say we weren't allowed to. I would definitely say it wasn't encouraged for us to like use slang in the classroom. It was a lot more like structured, strict environment as one might expect a private school is. You know, your
Right.
parents are paying a lot of money for this stuff. So I think that, you know, there are a lot of, I don't know, stereotypes, biases, you know, whatever you want to call them.
A lot of school pride.
A lot of school pride. I think it also depends what school you went to. Like, let's say, for example, if the school was good at a certain sport and that was kind of just like the culture of the school, they would like rally behind that sport or whatever and like kind of like raise up those players. Like they were like, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's really special, you know? I mean, not saying there weren't, you know, but,
Yeah.
you know, I think that
They had
kind of
them on a
plays into it
pedestal.
too. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, private school is really expensive. I'd say since I've gone to school, tuition's probably like more than doubled from when I graduated up until now, which that to me, I'm just like, you could literally buy a car, you know, with like someone's
I know.
private school tuition. On the flip side though, like, I mean, I do, so my friend group or like family group is a wide mix of people. I would say a lot of my friend groups kind of like a toss up. maybe slightly more than half of us went to private school. The others went to public school, totally fine. But in my family, I'm basically like first generation private school kid, you know, and a lot of people don't, not that they don't believe that, but I think when they see me and I'm talking and whatever, they assume that I come from this like family of private school kids or something.
Right.
Which I didn't. Like but I just think it's kind of funny, you know, and then people meet my parents and they're like, "Oh, I'm a little confused now." And I'm like, "Why?" What's the big deal? But, you know, I mean, my husband went to public school. I mean, it's, you know, I think it just depends on the environment that you're in, how you're raised, what your, you know, parents' priorities are for you as a child.
And their
how
involvement.
how involved they are, how much they care for your education, that kind of stuff. I mean, I do have a lot of teacher friends as well who teach elementary school. And it's just, you know, surprising to hear how disconnected some parents are from their kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where it gets, that's
it
more
gets
of
tough
like
too, though, because I mean, it is difficult to live here in terms of, you know, in the financial aspect, right? The cost of living is high. So you have some families who each parent is working 2 jobs or whatever the case might be. So I think there is some difficulties there. But there are some families where, you know, they really want to have kids, but their kid isn't really their priority too. I'm sure that's
right. Yeah.
There's
a
some
piece
of that.
it. Yeah. And I mean, I definitely do know, like, I know you know, while I was in not college, when I was in high school, like getting out of high school, going to like graduations, because I had friends who went to a bunch of different schools back then. A lot of them were public schools. So I did go to like their graduations. I heard a lot of great colleges being listed off as they're calling students' names, you know, going up to get their diploma. I was like, wow, like these kids are going to Ivy League, like tech schools, private colleges, like wherever. And I was like,
it's not just about the school.
Right. Yeah. It's about like how the student, like the individual themselves, how I went into, you know, what was my mindset as a student? How much did I care about myself? And part of that probably is like, how much does your parents care that you're doing well too, you know? But I think there's a line, because there's some kids that are just not going to care.
Yeah.
And no matter how much it gets drilled into them.
But yeah. That's why I wanted to talk about this, because, you know, this throws in a whole new wrench to the complexity of choosing a school for your child, right? In, you know, where I'm from anyway, the choice is more about the ranking of schools in that area, and you have to go basically close to where you live. It's the same rules as it is here, but you know, you can kind of get around those things by saying, oh, your kid lives with the grandma or whatever the case might be, and the rankings are online as to which schools are best, and they're all public schools. So now you're throwing in whether or not the public versus private school aspect is going to have an effect on your child, and what you're willing to pay if you feel like the private, you know, avenue is going to be best for your child. And then you have people like my husband who went to public school for elementary and then went to private for high school. And I have a friend who it was vice versa. They went to private school for elementary and then went to public school for high school. And that's like so many variables that you got to think about in terms of where you send your child. And for me, at this point in my life, it don't really matter because I can't afford it anyway, private school. So I'm not really worried about it just yet. And plus my kid's only 2. So, but you still have to think about it because
there's planning involved with that. You can't just like one day wake up and be like, I'm going to send him here.
I think this really like gives a well-rounded perspective of the difference growing up in Hawaii from moving to Hawaii. But we'd love to hear more from you folks on, you know, anybody who's moved here from the mainland or anywhere else.
Or if you just visited, what did you think in your, you know, few days or something?
Absolutely. And for those of you who've grown up here, if you want to add anything to the conversation or, you know, give any tidbits that you thought about while we were talking, that'd be good too. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Outright Effect. You can find us at theoutrighteffect.com, on social media at The Outright Effect on Instagram and Facebook, or email us at theoutrighteffect@gmail.com. See you guys next time. Bye.